Welcome to the show, Fox News contributor Tomi Lahren. Tomi, it's great to have you on. It's good to see you. What's your take on this as Senate Republicans may launch probes into Hunter Biden after the midterms?
Well, it's needed, and I'm actually surprised that it would take this long. But I think when we're discussing this, we know who has a dog in this fight. We know the Democratic Party has a dog in this fight. We know that the Biden family has a dog in this fight. But what's most angering to me, and should be to all Americans, regardless of political affiliation, is the media and their role in this, and why they waited so long to admit something that they likely knew ahead of the 2020 election, but dismissed as Russian disinformation. Imagine what country would be different, how our country would be different if they would have reported on this story accurately instead of labeling it as they did. And it's not just the media, it's also big tech, and they need to be held accountable because they are controlling a lot of the narrative here.
Yeah, and you know, people on social media are not up to speed on what's going on if that's all they're doing is reading each other's Twitter feeds, because the Justice Department is investigating Hunter Biden for alleged foreign lobbying, money laundering violations, and tax violations related to his overseas business dealings in places like China, Russia, and Kazakhstan. Now, these more than 4 dozen intelligence experts, they're not apologizing for saying the New York Post Hunter Biden story about Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. The thing with this, Tomi, is that when they said that, and this is why the people are being misled out there. Their big caveat footnote was this: we don't know if the emails are genuine or not. They just look suspicious to us. That's who the media was quoting, these 51 experts. Your reaction?
Well, that's compare and contrast that to the 4 years of the Trump administration when they tried time and time again to prove that President Trump had issues with his business dealings, that he had actual ties and collusion with Russia, and talk about reporting on a phony dossier and golden showers. All of this, they didn't care about the facts. They didn't care about the evidence. They just wanted to torpedo, attack, and slander our former president. But when we want to talk about collusion here, the real collusion is between the Biden family, the Democrats, the mainstream media, and big tech, who all work to silence this story. But Liz, I think that there's a bigger story to this because there's a lot of outrage. But I think we also need to look at the strategy right now and the motivation for outlets like the New York Times finally coming clean. Now, my guess is this: now that Joe Biden's popularity rating is tanking, now that it is clear that he is not the man to lead this country, the Democrats are attempting to distance themselves from Joe Biden. So now, if they talk about Hunter Biden or they talk about the existence of the laptop or shady business dealings, they don't care as much because I believe they're okay with throwing Joe Biden and his family under the bus. They want to see a new Democrat take over in 2024. So I think that there's more motivation to this beyond just what we're seeing right in front of our faces.
Yeah, and the president's approval rating just took another nosedive to 36% in a new Civics poll. Let's watch former AG William Barr on this. Watch this.
As soon as this letter came out from these so-called intelligence specialists, the DNI, John Radcliffe at the time, and the FBI, which worked for me, both came out and said this was not the result of disinformation.
You know, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki is not taking down her tweet claiming this, and she's shutting down reporters asking about questions about this. She's saying now, Tomi, that Hunter does not work for the government. The problem is her boss works for the government. It's about President Joe Biden's involvement in this, too.
Yeah, the quote-unquote big guy, as they say. So there's a lot more to the story. There needs to be a Senate investigation. You know, it's one thing when you're just talking about Hunter Biden, you're talking about his private dealings and whether he had the qualifications to sit on energy boards or make all of this money from China and Ukraine and elsewhere. That's one part of the story. But if you've got the son of the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, selling political influence and possibly access to his very high-powered family members, that's a matter of national security, and the American people, quite frankly, should feel lied to by not only the Biden family, but again, the mainstream media that is supposed to serve as the watchdog. There's a reason why most Americans can't trust the media, because they're not transparent and they don't hold our leaders accountable if they like the political leanings of the leaders in office.
And the president's son being in business with the government of communist China, with entities who have backing by, you know, state military intelligence as well. This is not a private matter. To your point, many say it's a matter of urgent public interest. Jen Psaki said last year Hunter Biden was in the process of divesting his 10% share of a Chinese investment fund. He has apparently apparently he hasn't done it yet. And now we've got author Peter Schweizer saying the Biden family, by his investigative reporting, has done 5 deals totaling more than $30 million with individuals with direct ties to Chinese intelligence.
And when we think about everything that we've suffered worldwide because of China and because of a lot of their disinformation regarding COVID, and now we're talking about Russia and China possibly teaming up with Russia and what influence they have there, this is definitely a matter of national security. And when we're talking about Hunter Biden sitting on energy boards, guess what? Ding, ding, ding. Energy is also a big topic of conversation right now. There needs to be an investigation, and we wish we had more investigative journalists that thought more about seeking the truth and reporting it and not just coddling those with whom they agree with.
Tomi Lahren, great to see you. Come back soon, okay?